Today on the agenda, I will be talking about why you should consider putting your documentation with your source code. My name is Kenny, and this is Tech Talk with RHT Services, where I talk about software development, web development, and all kinds of things related to tech. Now, when it comes to documentation, this is one thing that developers hate having to do. And speaking from personal experience, as a level 2 support or working in operations and now doing software development or web development as well, yeah, documentation is not the easiest thing to do, but it is what I refer to as a necessary evil. Now, why should you keep it in your source code or keep it as part of your source code? Well, if you have documentation next to where the code updates are being made, it is more likely that the documentation will be kept up to date with the code as it changes. Whether you're implementing a bug, implementing a feature, or just doing some refactoring, whatever the case may be, all of those things can be done at the same time. And if they are done at the same time, they're more inclined to be kept up to date. Now, I know what you're thinking. Developers writing documentation? That's a bad idea because developers write code. True, developers write code. Not so much true for developers not writing documentation. Here's my thinking behind this. If the developers know the code so well and they know what this application is supposed to do, why would you not have them contributing to or even writing the documentation? Yes, you can have a business analyst or a project manager or someone else involved with that application to write the documentation, but it should be the developer's responsibility ultimately to not only review that documentation, but contribute to the documentation because they know what that code it can and should be doing the best and the most. Now, for the applications that I have written, historically speaking, I did not write the did not put the documentation with the source code. Typically, it would be a separate document, kept it somewhere else, and it would be a Word document, which made it even horrible. In some cases, I've actually seen documentation done as PowerPoint presentations. I know what you're thinking, what? But yeah, I had a project in college where we had to create a project binder, and that binder had to be done in PowerPoint. And we had to explain a lot of other things in that. And well, that's just how it had to be done. Now, you can do the documentation in a Word document. However, I would caution any developer that if you choose to do documentation in a Word document, you're going to have issues. What do I suggest? I suggest that if you are writing documentation for your particular project, that you create a separate folder for that documentation separate from the actual application code. And then in that, you create what is known as Markdown files. Now, those Markdown files are basically plain text files that have certain syntax to highlight certain things in a certain manner. You can do your level 1 through 6 heading tags. You can do links. You can do images. You can do styling of the bolding, bullet points, all of those things that you would normally do when it comes to building out a web page. You can style your documentation in the same way using MK Docs. Then I would also add that as part of your CI/CD process for your application, because I hope you actually do have a CI/CD process for your application, you could then also have an additional task in that process that will build and deploy the documentation out to a static website. Now, to give the high-level view of this, it will look like this. Your application, you do a build of your application, you push to dev or whatever commit, however your committing strategy is, you do that. Once that request gets approved, it then goes to test. Once test passes all those test cases, you then deploy to production. After the deployment of production, you then have another task in your CI/CD process that will then go get the documentation Markdown files and build those out as a static website. That static website is then built out and deployed to its respective production environment. And that way, your documentation is always up to date with the same version of the application. You don't have to do any manual steps with that. Because you're using a static site generator to generate that documentation, it should be pretty straightforward. Most, if not all, of the static site generators, at least the ones that I'm aware of, including MK Docs, Hugo, Gatsby, all support Markdown files. So when you create your Markdown files and then you deploy it with the static site generator, it should just work. Now you may have to style those static site generators to match the color scheme of your choosing or a theme of your choosing, but pretty much everything should work out of the box. Now, why do I say do it this way? Well, it's the easiest way. In addition to, you can put it in your pipeline with your CI/CD process. So there's not an additional step when it comes to deploying the documentation. You just have to set up a separate site for it, or you can even add it as a link in your application, depending on how you set up your application, so that users, as they go through the application, if they need some help or whatnot, you can have a question mark or something else of that nature up like in a corner somewhere or next to an icon or whatever that will take them to that documentation where they can read up on how to get the help that they need for whatever issue that they are facing. If you have any different thoughts about where your documentation should be stored or why you should not put it in your source code or with your source code, leave a comment down below. I'm curious to hear the opinions of you and as well as anybody else who watches this video. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe and follow. And also, if you have not already, give this video a thumbs up. More information and tech tips are on the website rhtservices.net, where I talk about not only the projects that you will see here, but potentially future projects, as well as some source code that is available for purchase from the website. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.